Hello and welcome back to another segment of Heating with Infrared. Today we're going to be comparing infrared heat with combustion-based heat. Almost every other heat source besides infrared is combustion-based. For example, oil, gas, wood, coal, kerosene, they're all combustion-based. What is the difference between combustion-based and infrared? Well, combustion-based heat, because it takes the moisture out of the air, it rises quickly. The average temperature in a home is 6 to 17 degrees warmer than the floor because non-combustion based heat rises quickly, so the ceiling is warmer than the floor. But with infrared, the ceiling is only 1 to 2 degrees warmer than the floor. Another difference is how infrared moves throughout your home. If you have an infrared heater in front of you here, you could have it 6 feet in front of you. And if it's really cold outside and it's the only heater you have on in your house, and you live in a big house that's 3,000 square feet, you won't be warm even with that heater right in front of you. And the reason is the moisture molecules in the air takes that infrared heat, distributes it throughout your house evenly, and it happens almost instantly. If you had a combustion-based heater, like one of these space heaters, you could have that right in front of you and you would be warm, but the rest of your house would be very cold. I had a lady come into one of my retail stores a couple years ago, and she said to me, "I bought one of your heaters and it doesn't work. I have it 6 feet in front of me and it doesn't keep me warm." And I asked her how big her home was. She said, well, her home was 3,000 square feet. So I explained to her, infrared is different than combustion-based. If she had one of these space heaters in front of her, she would be really warm, but the rest of her house would be really cold. With an infrared heater, like our Heat for Less heater, you put that in front of you. If it's the only heater you have on in your house, and it's really cold outside, and your house is bigger than 2,000 square feet, you may not be warm, even though it's right in front of you. And the reason is, with infrared, it keeps the moisture molecules in the air, and the heat goes out through, it comes out of the heater throughout your whole house almost instantly. But with combustion-based heat, it takes the moisture out of the air and produces a dry, unhealthy heat, and it stays close to you, but the rest of the house will be cold. So what this lady needed to do is she needed to put curtains across the doorway. If she wanted to heat just the living room, she needed to put curtains across or shut doors to keep the heat in the room. Otherwise, infrared heat goes out to heat your whole house. Now you might think, well, that's a bad thing, isn't it? Well, let me share with you this. When I first started using infrared heat in my home, I used just one. And I realized that that room was not any warmer than any other room in my house. And it occurred to me that infrared heat moves with the moisture molecules throughout the house. And so the oil that I was burning was being supplemented by my infrared heat. So I thought, well, what if I added another infrared heater and turned the oil off? And so that's what I did. So when it gets really cold, I need a total of 3 of them. But most of the season, I heat my entire home with just 2 of them, turn the oil completely off, and I've cut my heating bill in half. Infrared is also a clean heat. If you look at heating with wood or coal, you have the smoke, you have the ashes you need to clean up, and it can be smelly, it can be dirty, and it can be dusty, and it's a lot of work. If you heat with kerosene, you have the odor, and then the hassle of carrying the kerosene and filling it up, and it's just a lot of work. It's more expensive than infrared, but it's also dirtier, it's not as safe, it's not as healthy, it's a lot more work, so why use it? Infrared is the easiest, cleanest, safest, cheapest form of heat there is. Another thing to note, when you heat your home with infrared heat, let's say you have a power outage and your electricity goes off, and maybe you live in a remote area in the woods or something. You turn the generator on and you plug in this heater, and this heater can heat your entire home. If you plug in this heater, it's going to use the same amount of electricity, but it's only going to heat a little area around it. So if you lose electricity, infrared heat is so easy to use and it heats so much of your home. Quite often people will call and ask, how many BTUs is your infrared heater? Well, BTUs is really an antiquated way of calculating heat output. The way you calculate BTUs, BTU stands for British Thermal Unit, is you take 1 watt of electricity, 1 watt of electricity times 3.412. And you multiply them, and then that tells you how many BTUs a particular heater is putting out. Well, this one here uses the same amount of electricity as this one. That means they produce the same amount of BTUs, but this one heats 10 times a bigger area than this one does. Now, I've had people who install HVAC, that means heating and air conditioning, for a living. And they said, no, BTUs is BTUs. And then I had them come in and I had them see how much electricity my infrared heater uses versus other space heaters, and then the area that it heats and how much heat it produces. And every time, without exception, they said, I learned something new about BTUs. BTUs is not an accurate way of calculating heat output. Now, in another segment, we talk a little bit about the safety of infrared heat, but I just want to cover an area here because it sort of applies here as well. My mother-in-law, who's in her 70s, lives by herself. My wife and I are always concerned about her health and her safety. While her health is failing, she actually lives on oxygen 24/7, and she doesn't get around very well. Well, because infrared is safe, and it's also the healthiest form of heat there is, we feel really good about the fact that she heats her entire place, her entire living area, with infrared heat. We know that it won't start a fire, and we know that the oxygen level is higher, and the moisture is healthy, and she's healthy. And she's even said that infrared heat has made it better for her to breathe and has helped her living situation. So look, oxygen is very flammable, and it's totally safe even around infrared heaters.